Hey, hello and welcome to this opportunity for a very special conversation with a very special person. Arguably, the most influential person and leader, caring citizen in the history of Scottsdale, perhaps since Winfield Scott, is Herb Drinkwater, a dear friend, a mentor, and of course, one of Scottsdale's key architects of this community that we all love so much. We have an opportunity here today to just have a conversation about Herb's views of the history of Scottsdale and some of the things that were so important to him that created this community. Herb, welcome.
Thanks, Dick. It's great to be here. And you know, we should just talk about Scottsdale. We should talk about the great city manager that you are. You have done some wonderful things for Scottsdale, and you bring compassion to the job, and it's really important. You care about people. You care about citizens. You care about your fellow citizens, and you always make yourself available 7 days a week, and I appreciate that.
Well, thank you, Herb, and as always, worrying about the other person, and I appreciate those kind words. And maybe just as a place to start, we can go anywhere that you want to, or anywhere that makes sense, but maybe back to was it 43, 46 when you moved here? And
well, the first time that I came to Scottsdale was 1943. And my father had taken a job there. My father and mother and family, I had three children at that time. Lois, my youngest sister, was born in Arizona, but the rest of us, I was the oldest, were all born in northern New York State. And I had asthma and rheumatic fever. And the doctor, I can remember telling my parents, and I overheard this, that your son's not going to live a year. And my mother, of course, cried, and my father had come from England, you know, and he was just getting settled in a very special place. He was a mathematics teacher, and he liked his job. And they said, "What can we do to help our son?" I said, "Well, maybe you could take him to California, but I don't know. That's getting kind of crowded." And this was back in 1943. And they said, "Maybe try Arizona." So my dad applied for jobs in Phoenix, at North Phoenix High School, Glendale, and Nogales, and he got all of them. And he chose, and I'm very pleased that he chose, to take the job of teaching mathematics and coaching at North Phoenix High School. And his principal, a man named Mr. Elliott, lived on the corner of Indian School Road, right where the Valley Ho is. And we hadn't been here very long, and we were living on 6th Avenue in Van Buren, which was not a great neighborhood then and not great today either, I guess. And we drove out there to have dinner one Sunday, and it was a long drive from Phoenix, 6th Avenue in Van Buren, to where the Valley Ho is today.
Dirt roads?
Dirt roads, at least half away. Sure. And that afternoon, we had a good time, and I got a chance to borrow a bike, and I was just getting to the point where I could walk and ride a bike, where when I came, I was maybe good for 10 or 20 feet, and that was it. We went over, and the approximately Civic Center in Scottsdale Road was a ditch and a great big, well, not great big, a small pond, I guess.
Seemed big at the time.
Yeah, seemed big at the time. And I don't know how, but I fell in the pond and swam, and rode back, and I enjoyed myself tremendously. My mother and father were sure that I was going to die from that. You know, I was a sick kid and never been to school in my life. Anyway, that was my first visit to Scottsdale, and then Scottsdale became a way of life shortly thereafter, and we lived either in Scottsdale or on the outskirts of Scottsdale for all those years. And then Jackie and I got married in the late 50s and moved into Scottsdale, out of Scottsdale and Shea, because the Scottsdale and Shea area, and by the way, Scottsdale Road was not much more than a dirt road, and there were no traffic lights. And Shea Boulevard didn't go past Pima Road, and it just put through from 32nd Street. And we moved out there because we didn't have to qualify to get a mortgage on our house out there, because nobody wanted to live that far out, Scottsdale and Shea. But anyway, when I was a kid, though, downtown Scottsdale was a special place. It was a place where all the farmers came to town on weekends. The Indians came to town with their wagons, and they shopped and cut their provisions. And it was a real Western-type town. I mean, there were as many horses downtown Scottsdale in the 40s and even early 50s as there were cars. And it was a wild place.
As a little boy coming from upstate New York, that must have been like going into the Roy Rogers Westerns.
It was something. I mean, you know, a lot of these cowboys packed guns, and I thought that was pretty neat. I was always trying to get one of them to shoot one of them. But they did have some gunfights, and there were a few people that were dispatched early in life because of disagreements in Scottsdale in the early days.
That was the Wild West, huh?
As I recall, Benny Cadena, a wonderful man. I think his father was ambushed over on 2nd Street where the old olive trees used to be. And
oh, sure.
Benny would be a good one to talk to about this one day.
Sure.
Because he's a native here, and his father ended up losing his life over there. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but.
So you had a rich childhood. Scottsdale was good for your health. So
it was good for my health. It was good for our family's health. It was a special place to live. Everybody was friendly. There were no stoplights. They used to call it. People used to kid and call it stop scale years ago, or stop stale, because there were 4-way stop signs everywhere, just everywhere, and. It was, downtown Scottsdale was a place for artists, cowboys, Indians, and everybody had a good word to say about everybody else. And it's almost that way today. Scottsdale, I always say that Scottsdale is the smallest big city in the nation, and there is no city like Scottsdale anywhere. What today, Dick, those nights, we don't have the gunfights and the things that we used to have. And I can remember when I was a teenager, and I'm sure you've heard the story, that there were, somebody had a disagreement over something that was in the gas station on Main and Scottsdale Road, and started shooting across the street at the other guy, and they were shooting back, and all of us kids were laying down behind the cars, and I don't know, none of us got hit. And the only people that got hit, all the cars got holes in them, but nobody got killed.
No, a lot of bad shots, huh?
Yeah, right. I mean, there were some wild things that happened.
What about, so you must have formed a lot of close friendships with the freedom to move around town,
yes.
and recall some of those friends and the things that you did.
Well, you know, a lot of the friends are gone now, unfortunately, but there was a group of young guys called the Sake Sippers. You ever hear of them?
No, I didn't.
It was the kind of the social club of the young guys in Scottsdale. I didn't belong to it, but all my friends did. And it was a neat bunch of people, and the Lessig brothers, and a guy named Ronnie Crockett, who's no longer here, and a whole bunch of just good people that are involved in the community today, and a lot of them still live here. The problem that the people my age had when they grew up in Scottsdale was when they got out of school, they had a hard time finding a job, so they had to move somewhere else. Even Phoenix, if you'll recall, Dick, even in the 70s and early 80s, it was difficult for young people that graduated from the university or graduated from college to find a job, and they usually end up having to move to LA or the East Coast or Chicago. And that's where I think that the city councils and the staff of Scottsdale have done a tremendous job in bringing good industry, good economic development, and good jobs to our community, because it's nothing more important than good jobs so that people can make a living and that the young people don't have to move somewhere else away from their families.
Sure, where the grandchildren can be in town.
Right.
You appreciate. How about high school and those years?
Well, I went to high school at North Phoenix High School in Phoenix because on the border. I was right by the border, and they wouldn't let me come to Scottsdale High School. And but we played football and baseball over here, and still hung out in Scottsdale. The A&W root beer stand that used to be down. It was south of 2nd Street there on the west side of Scottsdale. It was kind of a hangout place to be, and it was a drive-in root beer stand, and you'd always get a quart of root beer and last you all night, and ask for free ice so they could keep making it last. And but Scottsdale High School was an excellent high school. Wonderful teachers, and it was neat because a lot of the students, not a lot, but quite a few, rode horses to the school and kept their horses at the high school. If you'll recall, when I first became mayor, I rode my horse from Scottsdale and Shea to City Hall one day, and they kept it over at the high school.
Sure.
Remember that?
I do.
Yeah,
yes,
that's
I do.
been some time ago, and I wouldn't do that anymore because the traffic is just too heavy. But
1980.
horses, that was 1980, and this is 1996. And horses always had the right of way in Scottsdale, and as far as I'm concerned, they still do. Mm-hmm. And but you know, Scottsdale, as a young man, was an exciting community, a fun community. Had a good movie theater. It had, you know, the Schrader Ranch had these great big ponds. I mean, they were big ponds. And we always swam in those. And then Gainey Ranch had a big pond out by the ranch house, and we swam in those. I don't think Mr. Schrader wanted us to. I don't think Mr. Gainey wanted us to. But, you know, at night,
hot summer's night,
hot summer
cool
night,
water.
and I mean, we used to have parties, and we didn't drink, and at least I don't think I ever had a beer till I was 21. It wasn't because I couldn't have. My dad always said if you wanted one, have it at home. But it was a matter of just going out swimming and just listening to the frogs croak, and it was fun.
Those ponds were, what's where those ponds were?
Those ponds were, the ones on the Schrader Ranch were on the south side of Indian School Road, just past Messenger Mortuary, between Messenger Mortuary and Hayden. Hmm. And they were nice ponds. And of course, Messenger Mortuary was there when I was a kid. Paul Messenger, you know, he's a neat guy, and he used to fly his plane in to the back of the mortuary. And he would land, and he had to land just right because there wasn't enough room to stop, and he had to bounce over the fence that separated the pastures. He could take off without hitting that fence. It was close. But he did that regularly, and I used to think that was pretty exciting to go over and watch young Paul Messenger land his plane in the pasture back of the mortuary.
Making that bounce. Huh?
Right, making that bounce. I mean, he never missed that bounce. He was a good pilot,
yeah.
And I don't think he's flown a plane for a lot of years. I may be wrong. I don't think he has.
You know, of the many things that exemplifies your leadership career, your caring for Scottsdale, your love affair with Scottsdale is certainly...
Well, it's the greatest city in America.
When did you just realize that? When did you fall in love with this community?
You know, as a kid, I liked it. I didn't have a love affair with it when I was a kid, and I'm not sure any of us really do when we're kids. You know, we take for granted what we get.
Certainly.
As I became older, I got involved in different things in the community, and I remember John Harper, who owns Harper's Nurseries, was president of the JCs. He was in his early 20s, and he made a lot of good things happen. And he got me involved, he and Don Chambers Mayflower, got me involved in the JCs, and all of a sudden I became president. It must have been through default, but I did, and got involved teaching some first aid classes for some group, I forget who. And then Mayor Bud Timms called me one day and he said, "Would you like to be on the design review board?" And I said, "I'd love to be on the design review board." I'd been on the STEP programs, the Scottsdale Enrichment programs that started in 1964. Mm-hmm. And I really enjoyed that. So I got on the DR board, the design review board. Bill Walton was the assistant planning director then, and I drove him crazy. That's why he has stress today and had heart problems. But he always said that as long as we put wagon wheels and shake shingles on, I'd like anything. But I really learned a lot about Scottsdale in serving on the DR board and on different boards that I served on after that. And then, you know, I had a grave concern about high-rise buildings in Scottsdale because there were people in the community that said, you know, Central Avenue is going to have all the commerce and all the high-rise buildings. It's going to go all the way out to Camelback Road, and I said that's fine. Let Central Avenue have it over in Phoenix, but let's keep it off Scottsdale Road. And people were saying, well, Scottsdale Road should compete for those high-rise buildings. And I remember going to the council meetings and going to different meetings and saying, we don't want high-rise buildings in Scottsdale. We need to keep our buildings 30 feet high or not more than 36 feet high. And that's kind of what brought me to make the decision to run for city council in 1969, was that I felt that I had something to offer maybe in my views that maybe some of the citizens would agree with me that we don't want high-rise buildings all over Scottsdale. Because we were getting the Cuneo building, and we have, remember that, I called it the grain elevator. It was an old hotel, the Towers Hotel.
Mm-hmm.
It was down east of Scottsdale Road, south of Camelback. And I didn't think that those were really, I didn't think that they looked like what we think Scottsdale is. I always look at Scottsdale as a western town, the most western town, and I still do. So I ran for council, and I remember someone in the press saying, well, he can't win, nobody knows him. And I said, that's all right, I'll run, and I'll run hard. And Jackie and I and the kids knocked on every door in this town. I don't think we missed, I bet we didn't miss 100 doors.
How many doors were there then?
Well, there weren't as many. I don't know how many, but there weren't as many.
60,000 people?
Yeah, it's about 67,000 people. Mm-hmm. And we made some awfully good friends, and found out by accident that we were knocking on doors in Paradise Valley one Saturday evening. We're just north of Chaparral on the west side. I didn't know that was in Paradise Valley. They all told me they were going to vote for me, and I don't think they knew where they lived. But one guy finally said, Mr. Drinkwater, he said, you know, this is Paradise Valley. Now, where are you running for office? But, you know, it was fun. All my friends, when I told them, said I want to run for council, they said, well, we think you're insane, but we'll help you. And the first campaign cost us a little less than $3,000. And we came in second and won the primary. And it was fun. Mm-hmm. And I thoroughly enjoyed my 2 4-year terms as a councilman. And then I said I'd like to come back and run for mayor if Mayor Jenkins doesn't. I thought Mayor Jenkins was an excellent mayor. And he decided not to run, so I came back 2 years later and ran, and spent 4-year terms, 16 years as mayor, and I loved every day of those terms. I won't say they weren't stressful sometimes, mm-hmm. And I did get tired of the 3 o'clock in the morning phone calls 3 or 4 nights a week.
But you took every one of them.
I took every one. My phone number's in the phone book, and I met some of the nicest people in the world. You know, after becoming sick with this character building experience that I'm going through right now, today we were counting the cards. We now are up to over 6,000 cards from people, and I cherish every one of them. People write nice letters. They're just, you know, it's like family. People write letters to me and they say, you know, I don't really know you, but I met you once somewhere, and you know, we feel like you're part of our family, and we just want to talk to you, and that makes me feel really good. People sure. are nice, but you know, I can't think of a town that I would rather live in than Scottsdale, or a town that is as nice and that has people that are as caring and as helpful as the people of Scottsdale. If you have a flat tire in Scottsdale, somebody stops and helps you. If you run out of gas, somebody stops and helps you. It's that people care about each other. I've always felt that a true Scottsdalian truly believes he's his brother's keeper.
And you exemplify that. You know, if people were to say, if you break down Scottsdale, someone will stop to help you, they'd probably say it's most likely to be Herb Drinkwater. Because you've done that so many times, and the stories reflect that if you care, people care
I
back.
would always want somebody to stop for me or for my wife or kids. Mm-hmm. And, you know, to have a town, to live in a town like Scottsdale where people do care about each other. You walk up and down Main Street, and Main Street, I love Main Street in Scottsdale. I love the old town Scottsdale. I love Fifth Avenue, Marshall Way. But you'd walk up and down those streets, and people always go out of their way to say, hi, how you doing? And I don't know any other town that's really quite that way. There may be, but I have visited a lot of communities when I was mayor. I evaluated some police departments in other cities for the Police Chiefs Association, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. and I met some awfully nice people, but never did I see the friendliness and the caring that Scottsdale citizens have. The nicest people in the world live in Scottsdale.
For all the years I've known you as mayor, you're also a get-the-job-done kind of person. You like to, you have very, sometimes unorthodox ways to meet circumstances, like the Mayo Clinic is a good example. But once focused, let's just go get the job done. I want you to tell us a little bit about that Mayo Clinic experience.
Well, you know, Dick, for some reason, I saw in the newspaper where the Mayo Clinic had been offered some property in Jacksonville, Florida, and they hadn't taken it. So I thought that we ought to get moving and get and show them where they really ought to come to. And I went and talked to Dr. Art Nelson at the hospital, and he thought it was a good idea. So I wrote a letter and had it hand-delivered, and if I recall, I sent a couple airplane tickets to Dr. Gene Mayberry, who was the chairman of the Board of Governors. And I can still remember him calling me 2 or 3 days later saying, "Mayor, where is Scottsdale?" I didn't know if he was kidding me or not. But I said, well, get on that plane and get out here and let us show you. And he did 6 months later. And in a period of 18 months, we entertained and showed the entire Board of Governors, Mayo Clinic, what a great town Scottsdale was. And if you'll recall, it was a long process, but the Mayo Clinic made a very intelligent decision in moving to Scottsdale. Now, I did try to get them to move down by the airport, where Fletcher Museum is in that area. Mm-hmm. But they like the area where they're at with the mountains, and that's fine. And the Mayo Clinic, little did I know when I begged them to come here that they would end up saving my life one day.
Isn't that, there's an interesting connection.
I never had any idea.
They've saved a lot.
You know, I was happy with my local doctors and still am.
Sure.
We have some of the best physicians in the entire nation here in Scottsdale, both Mayo and non-Mayo. We have the best hospitals, you know, the Scottsdale Memorial Osborne, Scottsdale Memorial North. There are no finer hospitals, and that's why they're always busy. People would rather be in our hospitals than anywhere else.
Absolutely.
And it's been a great marriage to the Mayo Clinic. I guess if I had any disappointment, it would be that we didn't somehow work it out where the Mayo Clinic would build their hospital in Scottsdale or be part of the Scottsdale Memorial Health System. And I really felt bad that they built their new hospital over in Phoenix, but that's all right. It's still close to Scottsdale.
I want to go back for just a bit into history, because there's a story I recall from the days as a JC that I think is very interesting. Again, represents this leadership. Let's just go get it done. That was the clubhouse. The clubhouse that, you know, is not all too long ago been removed from the site where the old rodeo grounds.
They're using it at Rawhide.
They're using it at Rawhide. Tell us how that clubhouse got on the old site.
I became president of the JCs, and within 2 weeks we got kicked out of the room that we rented down on Scottsdale Road, just south of 2nd Street.
There's probably a story to that, too.
Yeah, I didn't do it. But anyway, well, he had a chance to rent it for more money. And George Wilmot, I think it was, a nice guy. And so we went and started meeting in a bowling alley, and we met here and there, and, you know, in the middle of the prayer, there'd be strike. And, you know, and all of a sudden, you know, we were down to around 14 members, and I thought, gee, you know, the JCs are so important to our city, and they still are. And so I called John Long, who was a builder of portable classrooms at the time, and a city of Phoenix councilman. And I said, Mr. Long, we need to buy a double or triple size classroom, and we need 2 bathrooms, and we need a bar, just, you know, for Cokes and things like that, and maybe someday for beer if we get a license. But he said, I never built a classroom for a bar with a bar. I said, well, I wouldn't assume you would. And he said, well, what do you want to pay for it? I said, not much. And he said, come over and meet with me. So we went over and met with him, and purchased this classroom with 2 bathrooms, air conditioning, moved on to the rodeo grounds, which is right just about where the parking lot is on the east side of the ballpark, where the old rodeo grounds have been forever and ever. And it was all complete, floor covering off $15,000. And I couldn't find, and I had to make this thing happen fast, and I couldn't find the board members to approve it. So I went to Valley National Bank, and I told them I needed to borrow $15,000 for 30 days. And told them what I was doing with it, and they loaned it to me. They had a lot of guts to do that. And I got the club, I called the board, got hold of the ones I could, and I said, tomorrow you're going to see a new clubhouse over here. And first I went to the city, though, and I got a permit. Last permit they ever gave to move a mobile home in Scottsdale. And we got it put in there, and got the board down, and I remember Dave Hawkins and Dick Campana. Dave Hawkins owns Greenwich Mortuary. Dick Campana is a wonderful man, a fine attorney, and Lou Jekyll was involved in that too, another fine attorney. And they said, well, Herb, you didn't get permission, and you're stuck with paying the $15,000 back. And I said, well, maybe we can charge so much to come in. They said, with 14 members, you're not going to make very much, are you? Well, I went home and told Jackie, I said, looks like we just bought a clubhouse, and she wasn't overly happy about that. But all of a sudden, and the board was giving me a tough time. I didn't know it. I thought they were serious. But all of a sudden, I put some ads in the paper. Didn't get permission to do that either. And all of a sudden, we had 150 members. And things really started going well. And the board, within a week said, we're going to pay you back. We had a fund, for future development. And so they paid me back, and I paid the bank. And they didn't pay me the interest, though. They still owe me the interest.
Everything works out.
But they gave me a tough time, and well-deserved, because by rights, I should have gotten their permission.
But then it might not have happened.
Well, that was my concern. And the clubhouse saved the JCs, I really felt, and it was used up till, gee, Dick, what year did we, the year we built the stadium?
Maybe, what, eight years ago?
And not more than 8 years ago we had the clubhouse, and it's still being used by Jerry Hirsch at Rawhide. So it was, and it was used for community meetings, it was used to vote in, it was used for a lot of things, because when we put the clubhouse in there in the mid to late 60s, there was not a lot of places to have meetings. The campus for the City Hall, the civic campus wasn't all there then. And so it was used by the city for a lot of things. But it was the last time the city ever gave permission to put that kind of building in the city.
A first and a last.
Yeah, first and last, but it was a good thing. yeah, you would remember that.
You mentioned that one of the things that got you into elected office was the concern for height and this character, that's so vital to Scottsdale, which you've worked so hard on. Through your terms as councilman, especially as mayor, the changes have, certainly that height limitation.
Height limitation did change in some locations, to, if you'll recall, many years ago, 1980 or 81, the downtown area was starting to have some problems with empty buildings. We had some transits. Our sales tax revenues were going down close to 10% a year. And, the heart of a community is its downtown. And you have to have a healthy downtown with 24-hour-a-day people living around it. And there's got to be a place where people feel like they belong. And I think people feel like they belong in downtown Scottsdale. But I can still recall, it was a group called the Los Arcos Neighborhood Association that came to the council one night and said, we're concerned about what's happening to downtown Scottsdale. And the council had staff get some facts and figures and got concerned and hired, I think it was Gruen and Gruen Associates, to come up with a downtown plan. And the downtown plan did allow some height in certain locations, like the Marriott, like the corner of Camelback and Scottsdale, which was United Bank.
What used to be the United Bank building.
Yeah, I don't know what it's called now. And where the Arizona Club is, and the Arizona Club is, it's a nice place to go, by the way. Anyway, those heights were quite controversial, and as was the underpass underneath by City Hall to tie in the Arts Center and the whole campus with City Hall itself. And when the building was built, it probably cost some city councilmen their election. And that was unfortunate because I think the building looks nice, and I think it's a good asset to downtown. It creates 400 to 500 jobs. And the Marriott Hotel, downtown Scottsdale, is it's good for downtown Scottsdale. It brings people in the downtown area. And it was something I had a tough time, had a very difficult time in my mind justifying going above 36 foot in height. And I had to do some real serious soul searching, and I had to talk to Gruen and Gruen and to our staff, to our council, and because it was difficult for me to accept the fact that we should do that. But finally, it was I knew it was the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. We didn't want to ruin Main Street or Marshall or Fifth Avenue, but we had an area where the Fashion Square was not doing anything. In fact, they were talking about doing away with the commercial and making offices in there. I don't know if you recall that. Mm-hmm. And we needed to get Fashion Square to be the greatest shopping center in the nation, which it is today.
And will become even more so in the future.
Even more so. And now the next challenge you have, Mr. Bowers and Mayor and Council, is to get Law Circle small.
Yes. To
be equally as good, and it can be done. But those buildings that went up to, I think, 72 feet was the limit, plus at the one time where you could put the mechanical on top, so it made it 90 feet. I think we changed the ordinance, so you can't do that now. It says 72 feet. Am I right?
I believe so, yes.
But you know, it's in very few locations. Probably aren't 5 or 6 locations in all of downtown you can do it. It has turned out to be good for downtown Scottsdale.
And creating that balance.
Yeah, it made a balance, and no question, there were people that were very unhappy with that. But now in talking to people, they think the building looks nice. The only thing that I hear is that they wish it were further back from the road. Mm-hmm. And that's something we've talked about. Mm-hmm. But downtown Scottsdale, it's the only downtown I know anywhere in this nation that was revitalized and brought back better than ever without taxpayer money. It was done by the private sector. Mm-hmm. I think we helped on the decorations on Main Street. I think we matched as I recall, we matched the amount of money that it took to do those decorations with the property owners. Mm-hmm. And I happen to like those decorations. I mean, I think the lamps and the things all look real nice. Now, when you get them done, there's always some that don't like them, but gee, when I go down to the art walks on Thursday night and I see sometimes 10,000 people, I imagine, and all the restaurants are packed and all the galleries are packed, I mean, that's so special. I don't know of any other downtown that has that, but again, downtown Scottsdale was revitalized by the private sector. And people say, well, you made a mistake when you let the Galleria go in. Well, the Galleria doesn't have any city money in it. It has no public funds. It's all done by the private sector, and it was done by a private developer who decided they had a dream to make a very special shopping center and very special place for restaurants, bought the property, and it didn't work. The timing was bad, but it didn't work probably because it didn't have an anchor. I've always felt that Francis Najafi, who now owns the Ritz-Carlton, he wanted to put a very nice conference center and 5-star type hotel in the Galleria. And I always thought that was a real good idea. I thought it was good for Scottsdale. But You know, that's the only bad part, the only failure that I see in the renewal of downtown Scottsdale. And it will overcome it.
Something will happen there.
Something will happen.
Something will happen there.
But what's nice is there's no city funds in it, and that's important.
Looking at other things through your elected office career, what are the things you're most proud of?
Well, you know, I was fortunate and very blessed and honored to be the captain of the team for those 16 years. But it was a teamwork with great city councils, great commissions and boards, and great citizens who got involved and did things. They made things happen. You know, Deon Cusack and Nancy Walker, when they co-chaired our
City Shape.
And Paul Messenger and group, who started the other one, the other group. I tell you, those are the things that I'm proud of. The citizen involvement, which has become even more, virtually every good thing that happens in our city is citizen initiated. And the citizens of Scottsdale make Scottsdale what it is. They take a tremendous amount of pride in their community. We wouldn't be the most livable city in America if it weren't for the people that lived here. Because when they came and evaluated Scottsdale, of course they looked downtown, they loved downtown. They went out in the neighborhoods and talked to people. And they found people in Scottsdale that loved their city and took a tremendous amount of pride. And of course, I'm proud of what the citizens did to save our mountains.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's easy to be an environmentalist if somebody else's land is somebody else's money. But when you vote by a large majority to pay, to tax yourself, to save the mountains for the future generations, I can't think of anything more commendable and more important. And it certainly speaks well for the people that live in our city. It shows that they do love their city. Because the people that are most involved in saving the mountains don't live near the mountains. A lot of them live in the other end of town, in the established communities, farthest away from the mountains. And you look how they got involved. You know, I look at Carla, Robert Pettigrew. Well, they did a great job.
It comes back to caring again, doesn't it? Having a vision and caring about it.
Having a vision. And the people voted. And they voted big to pay out of their pockets to save those mountains for future generations. How important that is. How important.
You can see them right out the window. It's magnificent.
Sure can.
There's always another side, too. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
The other side is, what are the disappointments? You know, there have to be a certain number, and I know, having worked next to you for 16 years, that there were times when you were frustrated or disappointed. And what are the hard lumps along that road?
I think, you know, frustration and disappointments are part of the job. And, you know, you and I both have gone through the frustration, and both of us have said, I'm quitting. I said, no, you're not.
I think I said that, too.
Yeah, you did. I said, no, you're not. But, you know, it's there are times, you know, both you and I would like to have saved those mountains in the early 80s. I mean, we talked about it when you became city manager, and there just wasn't the interest in the community. But once people started seeing homes go up the mountainside, then it became a real priority. And the citizens pulled together, and boy, I'll tell you, did they do a great job. You know, it's I've always felt that Scottsdale did things better than most communities because of the tremendous amount of citizen involvement. And I don't think any city has a staff that is better qualified, that cares more than the city of Scottsdale staff. I really mean that. You know, frustrations, you know, I've always believed that government is here for the people, for the citizens. There's no other reason for government than for the people. And we can't always please every single person that lives here. but we need to give them attention. And we need to always return their phone calls. And we need to take time to talk to them. And sometimes you just have to say, it's just not possible for us to do this. But I understand your concern. And maybe we can do it this way. And I guess my frustration was that I would run out of time sometimes, and I'd want to personally follow up and see if we could make an unhappy person happy, and try to find a different way. And I didn't always have time. You know, Dick, I remember you and I sometimes would be in there at 6:30 in the morning, and sometimes at 10 o'clock at night we'd still be there. And I don't think you and I ever worked less than 12, 15 hours a day.
It seemed that.
And, you know, I know how many Sundays did you and I spend in that place, Saturdays. And I guess my frustration was I didn't have the time to follow up on everything that I wanted to follow up on. Because I always learned something when I went out and met with somebody. You know, on the way home, I remember one night, it was 10:15, I stopped by this couple's house and scared them to death. You know, and they were really unhappy when they called and left kind of a nasty message. And I don't recall what the problem was, but it was about 10:15 I left after a council meeting. And, you know, after council meetings, we always had to go upstairs and try to figure out what we just did. And I stopped by this house about 10:15. It was, I think, Vista Drive, about 82nd Street. I knocked on the door, and they said, "Who is it?" I said, "This is Herb Drinkwater." "Sure." I said, "Yeah, it is. I'm your mayor. You called today." I said, "Could I talk with you?" And I'm sorry it's so late. I didn't realize, but I did want to talk with you. And so they let me in. Gave me a cold beer, by the way. That tasted real good. And I always had a rule: I never drank anything after the day was over. But I figured the day was over, and so sat there to midnight. And I remember solving their problem. And you know, they were very unhappy. They thought we were all crooks. And all of a sudden, they found that the problems were not insurmountable. We couldn't solve it exactly the way they wanted to solve it, but we solved it.
And you could form a relationship.
Yeah, and they're still friends.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
And they have moved, though, unfortunately. But they didn't move because they wanted to. They moved because he got a promotion. They moved to Chicago. And I get letters from them almost on a weekly basis right now, by the way.
Wishing they were back here.
Yeah, wishing they were back here and wanted me to get healthy. And it's real nice. And they don't want to be in Chicago, I can tell you.
I want to talk for a few minutes about this time thing, because I can remember a period of time. I think you told me, you said, "Dick, in the last 6 months, maybe it was 9 months, I've had one dinner at home with Jackie." I mean, Jackie's an extraordinary person.
And a native.
And a native, Arizona.
Right.
And you and Jackie and your kids. I mean, that time. I just like maybe talk a little bit about your family.
Yeah, it had been a better part of, you know, I got the greatest wife in the world. She was born in Phoenix and was a school teacher in Scottsdale for 30 years, and always took time to talk to people that called, because most evenings, you know, I was at a city meeting somewhere, and always took time to talk to them and try to, you know, to call someone on staff if it was an emergency. And but one time, I remember, it was over 6 months that I had not had a single dinner at home. But I have to tell you, though, once a week, Jackie and I would meet at 9 o'clock somewhere halfway between City Hall and home, and have a sandwich or a hamburger, or a glass of wine or a beer or something, you know, just and talk. And we'd usually spend about 2 hours talking, because, you know, I had a pager if it was an emergency, but I never carried a cell phone inside a restaurant because I didn't want to bother the people. And we did that once a week, and that was probably one of the nicest things we did, you know, our once a week date. Yeah. But to eat at home, I used to be so excited when I had a night at home. I'd look forward to it for a week.
Yeah.
I mean, it was fun. Yeah. And
with all the demands of the city, you never, for one minute, became less than a family man.
Well, my family's the most important thing in the world to me. You know, I have a daughter, Jamie, who's 36, and she's a pharmacist and a realtor. And I have a son who's 35. It's Mark, who has Jets and Sticks, is opening up a new restaurant and a real nice place over kind of behind Julio G's. It's almost built. He needs a liquor license, so.
Oh, you want to make a note of that, don't you? I think I heard about it.
Yeah. And, but you know, our family did things, and we did take every month. I took every summer. Excuse me. I would try from the time I became mayor. I would take approximately 4 to 5 weeks, not all at once, and we would go somewhere, and usually to our little place on the St. Lawrence River. And that was special. And you know, I had a fax machine up there and a computer, and I would spend about 6 hours a day on city business, maybe 7. And the worst part of it was that at night when we wanted to go out for dinner at 8 o'clock, it was 5 o'clock here, 8 o'clock there. So all of our friends got tired of us having 9 o'clock dinners at night because it was impossible for me to get out of there before 8 o'clock at night, because at 5 o'clock everything goes wrong. You know, if you remember, City Hall, 5 o'clock, every emergency can always happen.
That's right.
And, but we always did that, and that was really important to Jackie and my relationship. You know, I'd fly back and forth 4 or 5 times and paid my own way the whole way, by the way. And I remember you calling me once saying we need a quorum for tomorrow night's council meeting. This was at 7 o'clock at night, the night before, and I got an airplane and got back, paid my own way, and we had the quorum, and it was really important. I can't forget what it was, but it was something very important. But you wouldn't have called me if it weren't important.
And you wouldn't have come if it wasn't.
That's right. But you know what? Being mayor was the best job that I ever had. It was the most enjoyable. It was the most satisfying, the most frustrating. You know, all of us stick in our jobs. We want to do everything the way that we think should be done. We want to do what's right. We want to please people. We want to make people happy. And, you know, frustration of not being able to make everybody happy always bothered me. And, you know, in all the years that you worked with me, you never heard me complain about anything except a non-return phone call. My only pet peeve is if somebody didn't get around to returning the phone call.
Absolutely. Within 24 hours.
Yeah, within 24 hours. I believe that we have an obligation to return phone calls within 24 hours. I believe that it's rude not to. Even, you know, let's face it, sometimes you and I didn't want to return those phone calls. But I don't recall you ever not returning a phone call.
We do our best.
I never returned. I don't recall I returned every phone call. I found it difficult to get hold of people sometimes, but I always returned them, and I always gave each call 3 times.
It was nice when voicemail come around, because you could always.
It was nice because you could. It's kind of impersonal, but at least you could leave messages, and the citizen could say, "This is my problem," and I could call back and say, "Well, I understand the problem, and here's what we can do." But that's sure impersonal, though, I'll tell you.
Yeah. But
we could do that.
You know, we've used a lot of your time here in this conversation. You've been very gracious, and this is a day that you have other things going on.
Well, but true, you know, Dick, it's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Well.
And, you know, I look at today's city, and I look at Mayor Campana, I look at the city council. They're wonderful. They're doing an excellent job. And this is a trying time. You know, we live in America. People have a right to move here. And why wouldn't they move here? Right. This is a great place to live. And I noticed, I found the last term of office that people would move here from New York City or some other place, but New York City seemed to be the main place where they'd come in to be here 3 months and come in and pound their fist on the table and say, "You got to stop the growth, and I don't like living next to the airport." You know, why'd you move there? But you know what I find is the people that live here for any period of time are the easiest people to deal with and to get along with. Sure, it'd be nice to stop growth, but it wouldn't be healthy, and it wouldn't be fair. I think that the city council and the staff have done a good job of slowing growth down, And I believe that citizen involvement is also part of that. But that's our biggest challenge. You know, I've talked about it before, is the growth of the community and making sure that we don't grow to the point where we can't drive around the community and we have no transportation, no roads. And this city does have to come up with some type of mass transit program that needs to hook into the entire valley. And you've heard me say that for so many years. I'm sure you're tired of me saying it, but it's so important. But going back to growth, I don't think we'll ever control growth as well as we'd like to, but I think Scottsdale has grown in an orderly manner, and it's grown better than any other city in the state of Arizona, if not the nation. Does it please everyone? No. But not everyone is really completely fair in the way they feel about growth. You know, once you get here, you can't just say, close the gate, I'm here. Mm-hmm. But I do think we have an obligation to control our growth and even do a better job with the future growth of the community. Because we're a long town of, I think, 32 miles long, 185 plus square miles. And I don't think we can build enough roads for a built-up population of 300,000 people. And I think that's got to come down. And I think we are talking about a lower population now, are we not?
Yes, lower than some of the projections that we had when, in the last few years.
And that's so important. And, you know, I remember just a couple years ago, the discussions and arguments with staff about widening Scottsdale Road to Carefree Highway. Well,
this is going to be an I told you so.
Yeah, no, how did we live without it? No. You know, and I remember when there was in the early '80s when we decided to put Pima Road through. Well, the newspapers did a terrible editorial about me on that, but it had to happen. You just couldn't control. You couldn't. It wasn't fair to the citizens that lived here to have one road that went the entire length of the city. Now we only have two roads that go the entire length of the city, and that's Scottsdale Road, and that's Pima. And sure, we widen them with what we call temporary pavement that lasts 10, 12, 15, 20 years.
It's
and it works pretty good. Yeah,
very
good sub-base, yeah. Yeah, but I say, you know, we talked about, did we need to do that? Well, I'm glad we did it, and I think most of the council is too. Mm-hmm. I think staff is too. Yeah. It stops the accidents, you know. I'll be glad when the freeways are finished, and I'll be glad when whatever's going to happen, the Pima Road happens. I think that the city's relationship with the Indian community is good, but it's never been bad. But I think that the council and Mayor Campana have done a good job of improving the relationships with our neighbors to the east, the Salt River Pima community, and they're nice people. And they have a different way of life and culture, and we have to respect that.
We're neighbors.
We're neighbors. Yeah. And I think we get along well with Phoenix. I still look at Gutierrez Drive, dead ending, you know, in the airport, not coming through where it's supposed to, hook on the Greenway Hayden, but, you know, we make mistakes. But all in all, this is the best city in America, and I love it.
Well, that's a very appropriate point at which to thank you very much, Herb, for taking the time, for your generosity and for sharing these thoughts and your love of the community. And personally, as a mentor and someone who's learned from you, I thank you.
Well, Dick, working with you was a great honor and pleasure.
Well, we look forward to it.
Working with all the staff. We have a wonderful staff, and we've had wonderful city councils, and the people of Scottsdale have this infinite wisdom. They keep electing great city councilmen and great mayors, and I'm really pleased. But the greatest honor I ever had in my life was serving all those years as the team leader and as mayor of the city. I really loved representing my fellow citizens. It was wonderful. And
I know I speak for the council and for the entire community as I give you our love, our prayers, and our best wishes as you face this afternoon an appointment at the Mayo and very successful ongoing battle with your cancer.
Well, you know, it's something that I don't worry about it. I don't feel as good as I'd like, but I'm pretty stubborn in my mind that I'm going to lick this thing somehow.
Okay.
Not sure exactly how, but we're going to lick it, and we're going to do just fine. And the cards and the prayers from the people that live here in Scottsdale, you know, it's just like one big family. And, you know, I couldn't have made it this far without my family first, and secondly, my extended family, my fellow citizens of Scottsdale. They've been great to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, Herb, and thank you for tuning in. And again, we look forward to future conversations. And for today, good day.